trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a check of the top headlines this hour. Sources in Tehran say the crackdown on protesters has been intense over the past week. State media, however, shows a calm situation as the internet shutdown enters its fourth day and over 500 people are reported killed. India and Germany exchange MOUs from defense to skills as German Chancellor Merz arrives in India for his visit Asia trip. Iran's supreme leader posts a message comparing US President Donald Trump to past tyrants who were overthrown. Ayatollah Khomeini says arrogant rulers never last in a veiled warning to Washington. President Donald Trump says Iran has reached out to negotiate after his threats of military action. He says the US military is reviewing very strong options as protesters continue to be killed. Jerome Powell says the Trump administration threatens legal action against him to gain influence over Federal Reserve interest rate policy. A top Republican senator warns the move undermines Justice Department credibility and vows to block future Fed appointments. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung meets Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi in Nara as Seoul balances ties with Beijing and Tokyo. The talks come amid rising China-Japan tensions with a focus on US-Japan-South Korea cooperation. French far-right leader Marine Le Pen begins a crucial court appeal in Paris that will decide if she can run in the 2027 presidential election. She is currently barred from public office after a conviction for misusing over €4 million in funds. US Ambassador Sergio Gore says Washington and New Delhi continue active trade deal negotiations with another call set for Tuesday. He says President Trump and Prime Minister Modi can resolve differences despite strained ties over tariffs and Russian oil. Alright, let's now start from news on Iran. Exiled Iranian Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has directly appealed to US President Donald Trump, urging him to stand with Iranian protesters and help bring political change. Pahlavi raised Trump and praised him for his support of demonstrators and called on Washington to back the Iranian people against the current leadership. Inside Iran, authorities are moving to tighten control. The country's judiciary has issued a stern warning saying there will be zero tolerance for anyone inciting protests or using ambiguous statements to fuel unrest. The warning comes as deadly clashes between security forces and demonstrators continue. Meanwhile, Tehran is signaling diplomatic openings. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says the country is ready for negotiations, but only on the basis of what he called mutual respect, as the US keeps military options on the table. Let's listen in to what Iran's Foreign Minister said.
ما برای مذاکره هم آمادگی داریم. ولی مذاکره منصفانه، شرافتمندانه، از موضع برابر با احترام متقابل.
Joining me in this discussion is Yossi Kapur-Wasser, who is Israeli intelligence and security expert, and he joins us from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Mr. Kapur-Wasser, for joining me in this discussion. What do you foresee Reza Pahlavi to be doing amidst these protests against Khomeini?
Well, obviously, what Reza Pahlavi is trying to accomplish is that to make sure that President Trump comes good on his promises to take action against the Iranian regime if they kill the protesters. And that's what they do. So he expects the Americans to take action. And this goes along with his call for the demonstrators to go out to the streets and keep the pressure on the regime. And of course, he's worried that the Iranian regime will somehow manage to escape the pressure from the demonstrators and from the Americans as well by presenting readiness to resume negotiations about the nuclear deal. And he's afraid that for some flexibility on the nuclear issue, the American pressure on Iran and the sanctions are going to be lifted, and the entire idea of removing the Islamic Republic from power is not going to materialize.
Yeah, those are his expectations from the US indeed, and we will take that question again. But what is it that he now plans to do, or could be doing, or should be doing? Do we see him re-emerging in Tehran?
Well, I think it's too early for that. It's the pressure on the regime is growing, and we see the activities taken by the regime that demonstrate how vulnerable they are. But at the same time, I don't think that anything is going to happen immediately. Much depends on the decision of the American president. If he decides to take action, especially military action, against the regime, then the pace with which the demonstrators are going to put pressure on the regime is going to grow significantly. If not, then it might a little bit die down. Anyhow, it's too early for Reza Pahlavi to come back to Iran. The regime is still in control of the country by and large, even though it is challenged dramatically by the demonstrators.
How ready is Israel in this situation? Because it says that it is on high alert.
Of course, we are on high alert because, first of all, the Iranians threatened to take action against Israel regardless if something happens or not. They say that even if they identify some preparations to take action against them, they might take action ahead of the Americans, and Israel is one of their targets. They say so. So, of course, we are in high alert. And definitely, if the Americans do carry out military action against the Iranians have promised to retaliate against Israel. So we have to be on high alert anyhow.
All right. Mr. Kapawasser, in your opinion and assessment, how long before the US intervenes?
It's a very big question. It's hard to say. They don't have airplane carriers in the vicinity of Iran. It's going to take a while. They can carry out an attack from the United States itself or from their bases in the Indian Ocean, but we are not seeing this. They're still considering their option. I don't think they have reached already a decision what to do. So it's going to take a short while before they decide and then go and carry out an attack.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kapawasser, for your assessment. I requested to stay on, however. Viewers, let's also tell you that according to reports, large crowds have gathered in several Iranian cities to show support for the country's clerical leadership. People marched through the streets holding pictures of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Many in the crowds carried copies of the Quran and waved flags of the Islamic Republic. Reports say the demonstrators took place in several cities, including Kerman and Zahedan. In Kerman, crowds marched through the streets chanting slogans. These demonstrations come as Iran faces ongoing unrest amid growing international pressure over its response to recent protests. Request Yossi Kapawasser to join me back in the discussion here. Mr. Kapawasser, the protests, crucial to note here, are not just limited to Iran. They have spread outside of Iran as well. And demonstrations are being held in Los Angeles, London, Berlin. What does this really speak about Khomeini's grip on power in Iran?
Well, the demonstrations outside of Iran by the Iranian in exile are mostly against the regime because these people left Iran and they don't feel secure and they don't feel that the regime represents them. So that's definitely the feeling amongst the Iranians in exile. Many of them are supportive of Israel as well. So this is in support of the demonstrators and in a hope that all of this event will end up by removing the Islamic Republic from power. In Iran, what we see is, of course, there are some people that are supportive of the regime, and they were called to show their support in those demonstrations that you mentioned. And we have to remember these are they represent a minority of the Iranian people. The majority of the Iranian people is clearly against the regime. They have to be very courageous in order to participate in those demonstrations, risking their own lives. It's something that should be highly appreciated by everybody who's looking at what's happening in Iran. And I think that they have the power to, together with the American support, to pose a real threat to Khamenei. And we shall have to see how long they can maintain this pressure. And as I said before, the issue of American involvement is going to be crucial for deciding how long this can hold.
How do you see the sentiments in Iranian protesters? Do you think they'd want restoration to monarchy, or would they rather opt for a democratic regime?
Well, not even the son of the former Shah, Reza Pahlavi, he too doesn't speak about the restoration of the monarchy. He speaks about him coming back in order to overlook the process in which democracy will prevail in Iran. So I think everybody wants free and democratic Iran that would be free from the rule of the Ayatollahs, and that's what they all want.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Kapawasar, then for joining me in this discussion. Moving on, viewers. Denmark has firmly pushed back against US claims over Greenland, as the Danish ambassador to Washington has rejected remarks suggesting the island was preoccupied in violation of international norms. Ambassador Jesper Moller Sorensen has stated that Greenland has become part of the Kingdom of Denmark for centuries, a fact repeatedly the UN and the international community. It has been emphasized that only the people of Greenland have the right to decide their future, with all 5 parties in Greenland's parliament reaffirming this week that they do not wish to be part of the US or become Americans. The response follows comments by US Special Envoy Jeff Landry, who alleged Denmark bypassed UN protocol after World War II. Denmark has instead highlighted decades of close cooperation with the US in NATO and Arctic security, calling for continued dialogue based on partnership. I request Andrew K.P. Leong, who is an independent Chinese strategist, to join me in this discussion. He's live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Mr. Leong, for joining me here. Now, Trump has issued a statement to say that he's a fan of Denmark. So clearly, Denmark and US have good relations. Now, given that Greenlanders neither want to be Americans nor Danes, do you think this is an opportune moment for the US to strike a deal with Denmark that controls Greenland as of now and decide the future of the islanders?
Well, first of all, you got to understand why President Trump wants Greenland so badly. And the United States is already the world's largest economy, is the world's 3rd largest country by territory. So why does it want to occupy or annex Greenland? The reason is because Greenland has got lots of rare earths, and then rare earths is now the stranglehold by China over Americans' exertion of its hegemony. Secondly, Greenland occupies a very pivotal position in the Arctic passage with the climate change. The navigation route through the Arctic waters becomes more and more navigable because the globe, the Earth, is round. So the northern route is much shorter by distance because it's the top of this round ball. And then there was shorter the passage for commercial and also military shipping. And that's why there is a rivalry with a big Arctic nation like Russia. And of course, China is also involved in that. So that's the second reason why President Trump wants Greenland so badly. The third reason is because it provides an additional shield against possible Chinese surveillance through you remember the balloon incident. The Chinese drifting balloon was actually a surveillance vehicle but it was very, very high, high up in the sky. So high it's not reachable by even the most advanced American fighters, because it's high up over something like 40 to 50,000 meters or feet. But with Greenland, that provides an additional shield, and that's why President Trump wants Greenland so badly. And also, the military option to acquire Greenland is not the only option, because the whole Greenland, even though you look at the map, it's quite large territory, but in terms of population, it's only about less than 60,000 people. Just like maybe 55,000. Now, if President Trump gives each one a Greenlander $1 million US, that translates into quite a good bargain for such a new territory. And the United States, of course, has got the money. It's a lot of money, but not a great deal by comparison with Americans' financial power. And then you look at the, of course, Denmark wants to defend its sovereignty and is now negotiating or discussing with the NATO members how to defend Greenland, because President Trump is not ruling out military action. He said, well, by hook or by crook, by force or by negotiation, well, I'm going to get Greenland because of security, he said. Well, then how the NATO countries are going to defend its NATO members except by stationing troops? But Greenland, of course, is thousands of miles away from Europe. And then even if any troops stationed there cannot fight with the might of the US Army. But on the other hand, of course, taking control of Greenland is one thing. Occupying it against continuing Danish and Greenlanders' opposition is a different story, because Greenland is a very difficult terrain. It's very cold, icy, and then lots of impenetrable area. If the Greenlanders mount a continual resistance in this very icy, cold terrain, it's very difficult for the United States to maintain continuous control. So we're seeing a very interesting scenario unfolding before the whole world, let alone the loss of the United States credibility, because taking another country just because you want it smacks of course, predatory hegemony. Predatory in the sense you just want to grab what you want. It's the rules of the jungle, and it harks back to imperial Rome. So I think that this American is sacrificing its moral leadership of the so-called free world, of the whole world, in fact. But then, on the other hand, I think that the perceived security kind of concerns override all this. And I think that the kind of stance adopted by President Trump increasingly looks very ugly in the eyes of the whole world community.
Sure. Let's now discuss the presence of China and Russia on the Arctic near Greenland, and the comments that have been made by Donald Trump in that regard, that if US doesn't take over the island, Russia or China will. Now, both these nations have issued statements to condemn Trump's remarks on acquiring Greenland. But noteworthy here is that China has not said anything or responded to Trump's claims that Russia or China will take over Greenland if the US doesn't. Do you think anyway China is in a position to make these statements when it itself doesn't follow the international rule of law and intervenes in many territories on in international waters, including in the South China Sea, in the exclusive economic zone of Philippines that's under contention?
Well, of course, China has always been holding the position the country should respect the United Nations Charter, respecting other countries' territory. That is very, very consistent. And in fact,
but does China itself respect the UN Charter? That's the question. Because if itself it doesn't do that, how does it expect the US to follow suit?
Well, China always follows the United Nations Charter. people just quoting the Taiwan example, but Taiwan is not a country. Taiwan has always belonged to China, according to the United Nations declaration at the time of Richard Nixon. So that cannot be compared with Russia's aggression over Ukraine.
But I'm
or
citing the
President Trump's-
example of the exclusive economic zone in Philippines that nation is contesting Chinese presence at.
Well, that's okay. Well, because both countries, both Philippines and China, have different claims, as there are different claims between India and China over the border. But that does not translate into the UN Charter, because first of all, you've got to establish agreed the boundary in the eyes of the international United Nations. But as the border is disputed, as between India and China with the line of actual control, and also between Philippines and China, it's not a comparison. So I think that China still holds fast to this adherence of the international charter. But of course, China doesn't want to worsen the relationship with the United States because there's a meeting coming up agreed with President Trump coming to China. And then you can see that the two great powers are secretly and openly contesting their influence. But I think that the eagerness, the ugliness of the Americans' recent stance towards Greenland suggests that it is in a hurry, suggesting there is a lack of confidence. Whereas you can see that China is now pretty confident in its ability to withstand Americans' coercion because of the stranglehold over the whole world supplying value chain, not just the rare earths, but also anything under the sun is now produced in China, including some pharmaceuticals and daily necessities. So if China wants it, it can all tighten the screw somewhere, and that would affect a lot of the processes and various chain of production in the United States. So I think that China is pretty confident. It's maintaining an even keel. It's not going to worsen the situation, continue to stress the importance of the United Nations, and in fact that there is a United Nations meeting discussing this, and China of course would oppose it, but it doesn't want to go too far. And apart from the fact that there is not much China can do, thousands of miles away. But I think, as I explaining, the Greenland is not a cakewalk. Because in spite of its a small country, in spite of a small population, it's still a very difficult terrain. Icy cold, sub-zero. A lot of the terrain is impenetrable. If there is continuing resistance, it's very difficult for the United States to occupy that. Control it permanently. But on the other hand, it's an easier route, as I was saying, that the United States pays every Greenlander $1 million. The total price is not prohibitive as far as the American coffers are concerned.
All right, sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Leong, for your assessment here, but I request you to stay on. Moving ahead, viewers, an investigation has been initiated by South Korean authorities after North Korea claimed its airspace was violated by drones. President Lee Jae-myung has vowed a swift probe, warning that civilian operation of unmanned aircraft would be treated as a serious crime threatening national security. Pieces of the drones and aerial photos were said to have been recovered by North Korean forces after the aircraft were reportedly shot down. South Korea's military has stated that the drones in question were not operated by its forces and that no provocation was intended. A joint investigation with North Korea has been indicated as possible, though no formal proposal has been made. Tensions between the two Koreas remain high, with previous attempts at dialogue by Seoul unacknowledged by the North. I request Mr. Leong to join me back in the discussion here with his first comments.
Yes. Well, I think that both North and South Korea do not see eye to eye on many things, and not least the question of unification. Because many years ago, South Korea still held out the hope or both sides of some sort of eventual unification. But then that hope is now totally lost because the North Korean regime is diametrically opposing to it, because they see that any kind of attempt in that direction means giving up the Kim Jong-un regime if the country pivots towards democracy. And then, of course, the North Korea is so totally fed up with the so-called six-party talks on the denuclearization of North Korea, because the nuclear armament is regarded by North Korea as its insurance policy against American bullying. Because they're all fed up with the so-called six-party talks, which have been going on for years and years and years without resulting in anything meaningful for North Korea's security. President Trump could step over to the side of North Korea and shook hands with him, but at the end of the day, the United States was not prepared to concede anything, and in fact demanding almost total surrender on the side of the North Koreans before they even think about relaxing the kind of economic sanctions and so on. So that's not a very good deal for North Korea, and now Kim Jong-un is totally giving up on that. Is focusing on acquiring nuclear weapons as long-range delivery systems as a kind of deterrence against any bullying by other countries, particularly the United States. And that, of course, divides deeply the kind of attitude towards the United States between North Korea and South Korea, because in South Korea there are still American forces stationed there as part of the American-South Korea defense agreement. And of course, any kind of antagonism or confrontation between North Korea and the United States could easily drag South Korea into the quagmire. Now, coming back to these drones, it could well be that some civilian South Korea accidentally or even intentionally have this drone incursion, and that's why the South Korean government would like to conduct an investigation just to show the North Koreans that it's not intentional with any military purpose. But of course, when in the tense relationship in these two countries, any kind of attempt is not going to put the relationship on an even keel.
All right, sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Leong, for your assessment of the situation. And with that, viewers, we move on now to some science news. Astronomers have discovered the fastest spinning large asteroid ever seen, and the fighting is turning heads into the scientific world. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory has identified asteroid 2025 MN45, a massive space rock about 710 meters wide, roughly the size of 8 football fields. What makes it remarkable is its speed. The asteroid completes one full rotation every 1.88 minutes, setting a new record for objects of this size. Scientists say such an extreme spin suggests the asteroid is made of solid rock, not a loose pile of debris. Most asteroids this large would break apart at that speed. Researchers believe the object may have formed during a violent collision long ago. The discovery came from early survey data that detected nearly 2,000 new asteroids. Over the next decade, the Rubin Observatory is expected to find thousands more, offering new clues about how asteroids form and evolve. And that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World.